Okay, let's just jump right in. You know that feeling you get, that sort of whiplash when you're just scrolling through the news?
Hmm.
On the one hand, you see a headline screaming about a border crisis and, migrant waves, but then you scroll just a little further down and there's another story about labor shortages.
Right, and help wanted signs everywhere. The two things just don't seem to compute.
Exactly. And then, for good measure, you get a politician promising to bring all the factory jobs back to the Midwest, and that article is sitting right next to a terrified report about how AI is about to do everything.
From writing your emails to driving your car.
It feels like all the puzzle pieces we're being given are from completely different boxes.
The official narrative, it just doesn't seem to match the reality that people are living.
And that's exactly what we're digging into today. We are going to look under the hood of this engine of modern democracy, and frankly, it's making some pretty awful noises.
It is.
We have a whole stack of sources here that I think tie all these threads together. Immigration, automation, even crime statistics, and the broader economy into one cohesive and, I have to say, slightly terrifying picture.
And right at the heart of it, there's this concept from a speech that was in our source stack, a concept they call the beautiful lie.
The beautiful lie. It sounds, I don't know, poetic, but I have a feeling it's going to be frustrating. So before we get into the hard data, break that down for us. What is it?
It's a really striking framework. The core argument is that modern, wealthy democracies, the US, the UK, countries in Western Europe, they all operate on this kind of duality.
Okay.
So the beautiful part, that's the forward-facing brand. It's the values we all talk about. Liberty, justice, the rule of law.
Things we teach in civics class.
Exactly. But then there's the lie. And the lie is the economic engine room. It's the hidden machinery. And the argument is to keep the standard of living we're all used to keep costs low.
The system has to rely on something else.
It has to. It relies on a certain level of exploitation, on deception about where jobs are really going, and a fundamental denial of basic physical limits.
So we're not just talking about political spin here. This isn't just a PR problem. This is like a systemic design flaw.
That's the argument. And to back it up, we're not just looking at opinion pieces today. We've got a pretty heavy stack.
Right.
We have crime and demographic reports from 2024 and 2025 data from Wharton, the OECD, the FBI, and then we have some pretty dense economic analysis on what's being called the end of infinite growth.
And the limits to growth model, I see that here too.
Yes, that's the one.
So our mission today is pretty straightforward. We are going to decode why politicians say one thing but do another when it comes to immigration. We're going to look at why your job or your neighbor's job is actually more threatened by a robot than by the person picking strawberries.
And the big one.
And the really big one.
Yep.
Why the whole concept of endless economic growth might just be mathematically impossible from here on out.
It's a heavy stack, for sure. But when you start connecting these specific dots, the picture that emerges is, well, it's incredibly clear.
All right, so let's start with the most explosive topic on the table. Immigration and crime. There's this relentless narrative that the border crisis is a crime crisis.
That's everywhere.
But one of the source documents we have opens with this little linguistic challenge that I thought really sets the tone perfectly. It asks a simple question. Why do we use the phrase, jobs Americans won't do?
That phrase is a masterpiece of misdirection.
How so?
Well, the source argues, and I think it's a very powerful argument, that the honest and accurate phrasing isn't that at all. It's jobs we refuse to pay a living wage for.
That's a huge distinction that changes the entire conversation.
It reframes everything because it's not about culture or work ethic, it's about economics. Look at the numbers in the reports. Something like 22% of all farm workers in the U.S. are undocumented.
22%.
And 15% of construction workers. These are not small niche roles.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about the people who are literally harvesting the food in your refrigerator and framing the houses on your street.
So the lie here is the pretense that these jobs are somehow culturally beneath citizens.
Exactly. When the reality is that the entire business model for large parts of agriculture and construction depends on this labor being cheap, being flexible, and frankly being exploitable.
I remember reading a bit in the notes about the fragility of the food supply chain specifically. It made the point that if those 22% of farm workers just vanished overnight...
It wouldn't just be that the cost of strawberries goes up a little bit. The strawberries just stay in the field and they rot. The entire system grinds to a halt.
So it's a symbiotic relationship that we publicly frame as a parasitic one.
That's a great way to put it. We are economically dependent on this labor, But socially, we treat the laborers themselves as disposable.
Which brings us to the counter-argument. The one you hear at every dinner party, the one that's all over the news. Okay, fine, maybe we need the labor, but we can't accept the crime wave that supposedly comes with it.
The lawless border narrative.
Right, and this is where the data from the last couple of years, 2024, 2025, is honestly just shocking. Not because of what it shows, but because of how violently it clashes with the public perception.
Why don't you walk us through some of the top-line numbers? Because I agree, I think people listening are going to be really surprised by this.
So if you look at the official FBI reports and other agency data, violent crime in the United States actually dropped. It fell 15.2% in early 2024.
Dropped, not rose.
Dropped. And murder specifically was down 26.4%. I mean, these are massive drops in a very short amount of time.
And this isn't just a U.S. phenomenon, right?
No, not at all. If you look at the UK, the trend is even more dramatic over the long term. The source says crime there has fallen something like 90% over the last 30 years.
Wait, 90%? That can't be right.
90. 90. So the data suggests we are living in arguably the safest period in modern recorded history. But the really telling data is when you drill down into immigrant crime rates specifically. Texas tracks this stuff more comprehensively than just about anywhere else.
They separate the data by immigration status.
They do. And what it shows is that undocumented immigrants in Texas commit violent crimes at half the rate of native-born citizens.
Half.
Half the rate. And when you look at property crimes, it's even lower. It's 1/4 the rate of native-born citizens.
You know, that actually makes a lot of intuitive sense when you stop and think about it.
How so?
Well, if you're in a country without authorization, the very last thing you want to do is attract any kind of attention from law enforcement.
You want to be invisible.
You want to be completely invisible. You pay your bills on time, you drive the speed limit, you don't get into fights. Any interaction with the police could mean deportation.
And this isn't a new trend either. The source material points out that since 1870, we're talking 150 years of data here, immigrants have consistently had lower incarceration rates than native-born people.
Consistently.
So that brings us to the huge disconnect. If crime is objectively down, and immigrants are statistically safer than the guy who was born down the street from you, why does 78% of the public believe crime is skyrocketing? Why are people so afraid?
And that is what the sources call the media bias mechanism.
Right.
There's a study cited in our stack here that is it's devastating. It analyzed news coverage and found that media reports on crimes perpetrated by immigrants are 243% higher than their actual proportional representation in crime statistics.
243%. That's not a small thumb on the scale. That's a massive distortion field.
It means that if an immigrant commits a particular crime, say a homicide, that single event gets 2.43 times the airtime, 2.43 times the column inches of a native-born citizen committing the exact same crime.
It creates a feedback loop.
A powerful one. You see it on the news every single night, so your brain naturally concludes that it must be happening everywhere all the time. It overwrites the statistical reality with an anecdotal one.
There was that fascinating Swiss study mentioned in the notes, the minaret ban study.
Oh, that one's incredible. It was about how newspaper reporting directly impacts voting behavior, right?
Exactly. The researchers went back and analyzed crime reporting ahead of a major anti-immigration referendum. And they calculated that if the newspapers had simply not disclosed the nationality of the perpetrators...
So just reported the crime itself, not where the person was from.
Just the facts of the crime. They calculated the final voting outcome would have flipped by 5 percentage points.
5 points. In politics, that's a landslide. That's the difference between a law passing and failing. It's the difference between winning and losing an election.
So the media bias isn't just making people anxious or angry. It is directly altering the legal and political landscape of a country.
It literally manufactures a political reality that is based on a statistical falsehood. It convinces the voter that the danger is coming from outside when the data, year after year after year, says that is simply not true.
And this all feeds perfectly into the next section of the source material, which describes what it calls the use and throw economy. It breaks down this 5-phase political theater of how our democracies handle this labor contradiction. And I want to walk through this because it feels incredibly cynical, but at the same time, structurally, it feels spot on.
It's cynical because it's the hidden operating system. And it starts with phase 1. use.
Yes.
You have a labor shortage. Your
Yeah.
population is aging. Birth rates are down. So you need people for essential jobs. Bartenders, cleaners, farm workers, meat packers.
Essential workers that we were all clapping for during the pandemic.
The very same.
Yeah.
But you don't give them proper visas. You just sort of look the other way while they come in and fill those jobs, which leads directly to phase 2.
Which is exploit.
This is the really dark underbelly. The sources highlight how these workers are systematically paid below minimum wage.
Yeah.
And they're victims of just massive wage theft.
The wage theft numbers just blew my mind. The source claims $13 billion is stolen annually from workers in the U.S. alone.
$13 billion. And to put that number in context for you, that is more money than the combined value of all burglaries, all robberies, and all motor vehicle thefts in the entire country.
Wait, say that again?
More money is stolen by employers from their employees' paychecks than is stolen in every single robbery and burglary you see on the news.
It's just an invisible crime.
It's completely invisible. It's not a smashed window or a stolen car. It's a few dollars of overtime that isn't paid or a miscalculation of hours on a pay stub. It happens in the shadows.
And the sources gave some really harrowing specific examples. I'm seeing one here about garment workers in Los Angeles.
Getting paid $3.80 an hour.
$3.80 an hour. In L.A., that's not a living wage. That's a starvation wage.
Or the construction companies that were found to be systematically withholding 10 to 25% of every paycheck from their undocumented workers.
And the workers can't do anything about it.
Of course not. They can't go to the Department of Labor. They can't sue. They don't officially exist.
I remember this one quote you highlighted. It was from an employer who basically admitted on the record that she pays illegal wages.
Yes. And her justification was that it is essential for the survival of her business.
Which is really a confession, isn't it? It's admitting your business model is fundamentally broken.
It's admitting that your business is not viable under the laws of the country you're operating in.
Yeah.
It's a criminal enterprise masquerading as a business.
Okay, so that's use and exploit. That brings us to phase 3.
Phase 3 is scapegoat. This happens when the broader economy hits a rough patch. Maybe inflation spikes or the housing market gets too expensive.
People get angry.
People get angry, and politicians need someone to blame. They can't blame the business owners who are funding their campaigns, so they point the finger at the most vulnerable people in the system. They blame the immigrants.
Which then triggers phase 4, throw.
Exactly. Now you have to perform for the angry voters.
Yeah.
So you demand deportations, you can't close the border, you stage high-profile raids for the cameras.
It's performative cruelty.
It's designed to satisfy the anger that was created in phase 3. And then, once the political pressure is off, you get to phase 5.
Which is?
Repeat. Because
What?
after you've thrown out the labor, the crops start to rot again. The construction sites stall. The restaurants can't find dishwashers. And a new labor shortage begins.
So the same businesses that were silent during the throw phase start quietly lobbying for more workers again.
And the border enforcement quietly relaxes, and the whole cycle starts over. We go right back to phase 1.
It's this endless revolving door of exploitation. And the cost isn't just financial. The source mentions the safety gap.
That's the really grim reality of this. Undocumented workers suffer an estimated 300 additional workplace fatalities and 61,000 extra injuries every single year compared to the average worker.
And why is that?
Because they have no power.
Mm.
If a machine is unsafe, or the chemicals are toxic, or the scaffolding on a construction site is loose, they can't report it to OSHA.
If they report it, they risk deportation.
So they stay silent, they take the risk. And sometimes they get hurt or they die.
It makes you realize that all the talk about a border crisis is so often a deliberate distraction from the reality of a labor exploitation crisis. But this does bring up a pretty logical question, which moves us right into the next section of our deep dive. If this whole system causes so much political tension and human suffering, why don't we just actually close the border for real? Why not just stop immigration altogether?
And this is where we run into what the source material calls the demographic trap. The answer to that question isn't political or ideological, it's just math.
Cold, hard numbers.
Cold, hard numbers. The issue is the fertility rate. The number of children born per woman is below the replacement level in basically every developed country on Earth.
We're talking about the baby bust.
We are. The replacement rate, the number you need to keep a population stable without immigration, is 2.1.
And where are we?
In the U.S., it's about 1.76.
Right.
In the U.K., it's down to 1.49. We simply aren't making enough new people to replace the ones who are aging and retiring.
And that has a huge impact on something called the dependency ratio.
A massive impact.
Mm.
So 30 years ago, there were about 10 workers paying taxes for every one retiree drawing benefits.
That's a healthy pyramid.
A very healthy period. Plenty of people at the bottom paying into Social Security and Medicare to support the relatively few at the top.
Mm.
But because of those falling birth rates, that ratio is projected to drop to fewer than 2 workers per retiree.
2 to 1. That math doesn't seem to work.
It doesn't. It can't. Without a steady stream of new immigrants entering the workforce and paying taxes, the pension systems and the healthcare systems just collapse under their own weight.
There's not enough revenue coming in.
Not nearly enough to fund the promises we've made to our aging population. So you're left with 3 choices. You drastically cut benefits to the elderly, you raise taxes on the young to astronomical levels, or you bring in more workers.
So when politicians get on stage and talk about mass deportation, they are, whether they know it or not, effectively advocating for economic suicide.
According to the analysis from the Wharton budget model, which they ran in 2025, yes. They modeled out exactly what would happen if you actually deported all undocumented immigrants.
And what's the damage report?
The country's GDP drops immediately, somewhere between 1% and 4.9%, depending on how fast you do it.
That's a severe recession right there.
But the real kicker is what it does to the federal deficit. It would explode by nearly $1 trillion over 10 years.
$1 trillion? How?
Well, you lose all the tax revenue those people were paying, sales taxes, payroll taxes, everything. And at the same time, you have the enormous new cost of actually finding, detaining, and deporting millions of people.
Less money in, more money out.
The worst of both worlds. And interestingly, the model shows it doesn't even help native-born workers. It predicts that even high-skill workers would lose almost $3,000 a year in wages because of the overall economic contraction.
So literally nobody wins. The economy shrinks, the deficit explodes, and wages go down for everyone.
Nobody wins. And here's the most cynical part. The politicians know this. The data is clear. And that's the hypocrisy that the OECD report in our stack highlights.
What did they find?
That while politicians are publicly shouting close the borders, their governments are quietly and actively expanding what are called shortage occupation lists.
I saw that. The UK added something like 60 new occupations to their shortage list in 2025 alone.
Over 60. And Germany created something called the Opportunity Card to make it easier for skilled workers to come in. They're desperate for labor. They need these people to keep their economies from collapsing.
But they can't admit that to the voters.
They can't, because for decades, they've been villainizing the very people they now need to save their pension systems.
That is the beautiful lie in a perfect nutshell, isn't it? The public promises we will protect you from these outsiders, while the quiet, backroom policy is to usher them in to keep the lights on.
It's a complete and total disconnection between the political rhetoric and the economic reality.
Okay, so we've established the system needs immigrant labor to survive the demographic trap. Now let's pivot to the other boogeyman in this whole debate. We've talked about the immigrant, now let's talk about the robot.
Ah, yes, the robot in the room.
This brings us to Section 4. We always hear these promises every election cycle to bring back manufacturing jobs. It's a political staple.
The manufacturing myth? The source material is absolutely brutal on this point. It argues that those jobs didn't go to China or Mexico because of unfair trade deals.
They went to robots.
They went to robots, and the proof is right there in the numbers. China itself has deployed 1.75 million industrial robots. That's 51% of the entire global demand.
So China, the country we blame for stealing the jobs, is automating even faster than we are.
Massively faster. And as a result, China is also losing manufacturing jobs to automation. The jobs aren't moving. They're ceasing to exist for humans.
I see a stat here that despite all the tariffs and incentives to bring jobs back to the U.S., the country actually lost 70,000 manufacturing jobs in just 8 months.
You can't bring a job back that has been automated away. It's like trying to bring back the guys who used to operate elevators. The technology made the role obsolete.
But this is what leads to what the source calls the automation paradox. And for me, this was a real aha moment. It completely reframes who should actually be worried about AI.
It's totally counterintuitive, isn't it?
Yeah.
We have this baked-in assumption that immigrants are competing for the same jobs as native citizens, but the analysis shows that's largely not true.
How so?
Immigrants, especially undocumented immigrants, overwhelmingly take jobs that are what the report calls AI resistant.
What makes a job AI resistant?
It's any job that requires high levels of dexterity, adaptability, and movement through unstructured, unpredictable environments.
That's construction.
Construction, elder care, plumbing, harvesting delicate crops like strawberries. These jobs get resistance scores of like 94 to 96%. A robot is terrible at fixing a leaky pipe under a cramped sink. It can't navigate the mess. It can't gently help an 85-year-old out of a chair.
But a robot is great at
Repetitive pattern-based work, data entry, bookkeeping, paralegal research, and long-haul truck driving.
the middle-class job.
The classic middle-class jobs. The analysis shows these roles have 50 to 80% automation exposure.
So the real threat isn't the immigrant who is cleaning your hotel room. It's the software that's about to replace your accountant.
Precisely. And this is what's leading to the hollowing out of the economy. We've accidentally created this two-tiered system. Immigrants are filling the manual labor jobs at the bottom that citizens don't want and that robots can't do.
Well, robots are killing the white-collar and skilled blue-collar jobs in the middle that citizens do want.
And the real tragedy, as the source points out, is that there's no easy transition between those two worlds. An unemployed truck driver who is making $60,000 a year can't just pivot to being a dishwasher for $28,000 a year without a complete and utter catastrophe for their family and their standard of living.
They're completely separate labor markets.
Completely.
Yeah.
So blaming the dishwasher for the truck driver's unemployment is a fundamental misreading of the situation. It's a political distraction that misdirects anger downwards at the most vulnerable instead of upwards at the massive structural changes being driven by technology.
So just to recap where we are, we have a demographic crisis that requires more people. We have an automation crisis that's eliminating middle-class work. And we have a political system that is actively lying about both of those things. But the source material goes even deeper than that. It suggests that the entire economic game we've been playing for the last century, the game of infinite growth, is fundamentally over.
This is the big paradigm shift. This is Section 5. For the last 50, maybe 70 years, the global consensus among economists and politicians was that the economy could and should grow forever.
But that's now being questioned.
It's collapsing. The source points all the way back to the Club of Rome report from 1972. They were a group of scientists who used computer models to predict that civilization would hit hard biophysical limits within about a century.
And they were mocked for it at the time.
Oh, they were completely dismissed as doomsayers, as alarmists. But here's the thing. In 2025, scientists recalibrated that original model with 50 years of new real-world data.
And what did they find?
They found that the original predictions were scarily accurate. The curves align almost perfectly. And their model shows that the overshoot window, the period where we are consuming resources faster than the planet can possibly regenerate them, is happening right now. Yeah. Between 2024 and 2030.
So this isn't a future problem for our grandkids to solve. This is a Tuesday problem.
It's a simple thermodynamics problem. You cannot have infinite exponential expansion on a finite planet. It's a mathematical impossibility.
What about the green growth argument, the idea that we can innovate our way out of it with more efficiency?
The source material argues that's a dangerous fantasy, and it points to something called the Jevons paradox.
Okay, break that one down, the Jevons paradox.
It's this very counterintuitive idea that as technology makes our use of a resource more efficient, we don't end up consuming less of it. We actually consume more.
How does that work?
Think about cars. As cars became more fuel efficient, did people start buying less gasoline? No. They just started driving more. They moved further from work into bigger houses in the suburbs. They bought bigger cars like SUVs because the cost per mile went down.
Or like with lighting. When LED bulbs made the energy for light incredibly cheap, we didn't just use less energy. We started lighting up entire skyscrapers at night just for decoration.
Exactly. Efficiency doesn't lead to conservation. It drives up consumption. So the idea that we can just invent more efficient technologies to solve the resource crisis without actually reducing our overall consumption is, according to this analysis, a complete myth.
You can't innovate your way around the laws of physics.
Not if your only goal is constant, endless growth. And that's why you're seeing a growing number of economists in these papers shifting their focus to concepts like post-growth or even degrowth.
What does that even mean?
It means we have to stop measuring success by GDP. The argument is that success has to be measured by human well-being, sustainability, and health. Because the raw materials, the cheap oil, the accessible minerals, they're becoming energetically too expensive to even extract.
What do you mean by energetically too expensive?
It's the concept of energy return on investment. In the early days of oil, it took the energy equivalent of 1 barrel of oil to find and extract 100 barrels. Now, for some sources like tar sands, we're getting close to a 1-to-1 ratio. It takes a barrel's worth of energy to get a barrel out. At that point, the whole system breaks down. We're hitting a wall.
Okay. This is all connecting now into what the sources call Section 6, the existential crisis. It feels like we're being hit by a double disaster at the exact same time.
It's a pincer movement. On one side, you have the aging crisis. As we talked about, the costs for pensions and healthcare are just skyrocketing. They're projected to hit 25% of GDP in many developed nations. A quarter of the entire economy is just going to be spent on supporting the elderly.
And on the other side of the pincer.
On the other side, you have automation. AI is systematically eliminating the very workers who are supposed to be paying the taxes to fund that aging population.
The white-collar wipeout.
That's the term they use. By 2030, some of these sources suggest that up to 40% of all office jobs could be automated. We're talking HR, legal departments, finance, accounting.
These are the high tax-paying jobs.
These are the pillars of the tax base. These are the people buying houses, paying property taxes that fund the schools, buying cars. If a huge chunk of those jobs simply vanish, the tax base collapses at the exact moment the demographic pressures on it are greatest.
So what's the fix? Is there one? The sources seem to point to only one solution that makes the math work.
Universal basic income, UBI. It's the only variable that balances the equation in these economic models. If humans aren't earning wages from labor anymore, then you have to tax the new source of productivity.
You have to tax the robot.
You have to tax the robots or the corporations that own them and distribute that productivity gain back to the people.
It fundamentally decouples survival from labor.
It has to. In a world where there's no longer enough demand for human labor, you can't logically demand that people work in order to eat. It just doesn't compute.
And what are the benefits they see?
Well, first, it prevents a total collapse in consumer demand. Robots don't buy groceries or iPhones. People do. If nobody has any money to buy the products the robots are making, the whole system implodes anyway.
It keeps the economy from grinding to a halt.
Right. And it also provides a safety net that allows for massive retraining and reskilling. It gives people a floor to stand on while they figure out what to do next.
But there's a huge barrier mentioned in the sources. And it isn't just about the money. It's what they call the meaning crisis.
This is the really deep philosophical curveball at the end of all this. If AI is doing all the productive work and the government is just sending everyone a check, what do humans do all day?
Yeah.
The source warns of a future characterized by boredom, isolation, and cognitive regression. We have built our entire civilization, our entire sense of self-worth for centuries around the idea that work equals worth.
If you take away the job, do you also take away a person's identity?
That's the existential question. We would have to fundamentally reinvent the meaning of life beyond the framework of production and consumption. That is a much, much harder challenge than just reforming the tax code. How do you find purpose when the economic machine no longer needs you?
It's a terrifying thought,
Yeah.
but also maybe a liberating one. It forces us to ask what we're actually all here for.
It does.
Okay, so let's try to bring this all together as we wrap up. The central theme here is this beautiful lie. And I think I can see the full picture now. It's beautiful because we are sold these wonderful promises. Liberty, the return of manufacturing glory, infinite economic growth forever.
But the whole system is dirty. It's built on the hidden exploitation of immigrant labor. It lies about where the jobs are really going, which is to the robots. And it completely ignores the biophysical reality that the party of infinite growth is coming to an end.
And maybe the scariest part of the whole analysis is what they call the adaptation problem.
Yes. The argument that our democratic systems are structurally incapable of fixing these problems before they become full-blown crises.
Why is that?
Because a politician simply cannot win an election on a platform of, hey, everyone, the truth is we need to shrink the economy, we need to welcome more immigrants to save our pension system, and we all need to prepare for a future where most of you won't have jobs.
That is not a bumper sticker that gets you a lot of votes.
It's a recipe for political suicide. So our systems are designed to only act during the crisis itself. Think about the 2008 financial crash or the COVID pandemic. That's when massive, unthinkable change happens overnight.
So the solutions, things like UBI, managed migration, post-growth economics, they exist on paper. We have the blueprints.
We do.
Yeah.
But we likely won't see them implemented until the pain of the status quo becomes so acute that there is literally no other choice.
We wait for the system to crash.
We wait for the silence after the crash.
And that actually brings us perfectly to the final provocation from that speech we analyzed. It's a set of questions, something for you listening to take with you. The next time you hear someone blaming an immigrant for all the problems, ask yourself, Who do you think is harvesting the food that's on your table right now?
Hmm.
And the next time a political leader promises to bring back all the old manufacturing jobs, ask them, how specifically do you plan to compete with 1.75 million robots that don't need sleep, don't need healthcare, and don't take holidays?
And you probably won't get any real answers to those questions.
No, you probably won't. But you might get silence. And in that silence is the truth. Thanks for diving deep with us.